Hey everyone, I'm Tsetzuko, and in this video I'm going to be walking you through the basics of how to use weak auras. Now I know weak auras can be overwhelming, it can look really complicated, it may even seem a bit excessive. I definitely used to think that way myself, but weak auras can actually do a lot to provide you with a lot of useful information and just do some really cool and fun stuff. Now I intend on providing you guys with weak auras codes that you'll be able to import to use weak auras that I've created. And before I do that, I want to make sure you have a basic foundation of what weak auras are and how you kind of customize them and where to go. Now, this is not an in-depth weak auras tutorial. This is a overview. There's going to be plenty of stuff that I can't cover, plenty of stuff you're going to have questions about. Just know that when I provide a weak auras import for you guys, I'll have a video going in detail about how specifically to customize that weak auras import at that time. Okay, so weak auras is an add-on that you can get for World of Warcraft that controls the display of auras. Auras are your buffs and your debuffs. So anytime you see an icon like this is an aura. And the reason you might want to control these auras is you might want to show certain abilities and things at a certain time. I'm going to give you a quick demo of kind of how I'm using this, okay? So there are a few weak auras that you're seeing on the screen right now and a few that you'll see in just a minute. So the first one here is this little one here that says use Soulstone. This is an example of an aura I created that lets me know that I need to use Soulstone. So this one checks and it looks and it says, hey, does my character have the Soulstone buff? And if I don't, it displays this use Soulstone message. If I cast Soulstone on myself, the message goes away because I have the buff. This is really useful. You can use it to check and see if you have Power Word Fortitude, if you have Shadow Form on, if you have Battle Shout going, all kinds of stuff like that. The health bar, mana bar, and soul shards bar that I have here are also all weak auras. And these allow me to set up and track things the way that I want to with my player information. Also, right above this, I have a cast bar that's created with weak auras as well. And I can set that up however I like. You're going to see a couple more when I demo this in combat, okay? So we're going to go up over here, and I'm going to start casting my abilities. And you're going to see that once I'm in combat, I'm going to start to get little notifications here about what I should cast. So right here, it's telling me, hey, cast Hand of Gul'dan. And if I keep on casting, hey, cast Demon Bolt, cast Hand of Gul'dan. Cast Demon Bolt. Okay. Next up, cast Call Dreadstalkers. So you see all that kind of stuff that's going on. Okay? So those are all popping up in combat specifically. That's done through weak auras. And then finally, I have another set of weak auras right here that shows my buff timers. So you could see that I have Demonic Core right now and how much time is remaining. So like I said, I've set all this up via weak auras, and I want to show you the basics so that if you get these imports from me, you'll be able to modify them and tweak them to best suit your tastes. Okay? So weak auras, like I said, it's an add-on. It controls the display of your auras and other information. You're going to want to install weak auras and make sure that all of the different weak auras parts are active. Then to open up weak auras, you're going to open up chat and type /A, enter, and that's going to pull up the weak auras menu. Now you can drag and move this around if you want to. So feel free to do that and put it in a position that makes sense for you. I'm going to put it right here so that you guys can see everything that's going on the screen here. And you're going to notice all the different things that I talked about popped up. So we have notifications. We have the little icons here. We have all my player bar stuff and my player buffs. So before we get into these, I want to run through the menu with you. So up at the top, we've got 3 buttons. New aura lets you create a new aura. An aura is just an icon, it's a bar, it's a bar, it's a line of text. Any individual thing is an aura. Import will let you paste in a code to import a weak aura that's been created by someone else. And then magnetically align just helps you to line up your things when you are moving them around and trying to range them on the screen. At the bottom, we've got a couple of different links here. The two or three main ones here that you want to pay attention to. Get help will take you to the WeakAuras Discord. Documentation will take you to the official notes and everything for WeakAuras. And then find auras will take you to a website where you can find other auras created by other people. Okay. On the left here, this is where we see our different auras that we've created. Now we have two sections here. We have loaded and not loaded. When you create weak auras, you can set conditions so that they only load in specific circumstances. And you can see right here that I have these set to load only when I'm in combat and only when I'm on a warlock. So if I am playing a warrior, it will not load these auras and it will not take up resources because it loaded those auras even though I'm not going to use them. So loaded shows the ones that are loaded and not loaded shows the ones that are not loaded. Pretty simple. If we click on new aura, you're going to see a couple of things here. So first off, you have simple, advanced, and external. So external, once again, is just going to let you import a code from someone else. Advanced is going to let you create an aura from scratch. And simple will let you create an aura from a template. This is a really good way to set up auras and understand them. Now, if we look under advanced, we're not going to use all these. I encourage you to ignore several of these, okay? So there's three main auras that you're going to want to use on a regular basis. The first one is icon, okay? So let's create one of these. I'm going to show you how to do this the simple way. So we're going to go new aura, simple from template, and we're going to click on icon, and then we can pick a size. We'll pick a fairly big one here so that we actually can see it. And then you can go in and you can pick whatever you want. Let's pick Fireblood. This is my Dark Iron Dwarf racial passive. Okay, so we're going to click that, and let's just click cooldown tracking. This says it will always show the aura, and it'll turn blue if it's not usable. Okay, so sounds good to me. Let's call this one Fireblood Icon. When you're naming your weak auras, you always have to have unique names for them. You cannot duplicate names. Okay? And we're going to drag this out over here. So if we click off, we'll see, hey, there's the Fireblood icon. And if we use the ability, it'll change. But we'll get to that in just a second. The second type of aura that you're going to want to use is going to be a progress bar. Okay, so let's make one of these from a template. We're going to go progress bar. We'll do a horizontal bar, and we'll do it for Fireblood again, right? So we could see the differences between these. And let's do the same thing, cooldown tracking. And we're going to call this Fireblood bar. Okay. And let's drag this over here as well. Now, if you're trying to set up your weak auras and you're like, where'd that last one go that I just created? If you're over here, if you look on this right column right here, there's a little eyeball, and this toggles on and off your different weak auras so you can see them. So what we should do is we should toggle off all the ones that I've created. And then that way, we're just looking at the ones that we're creating for this tutorial. So now we could come in here. Let's hit magnetically align, and we can snap this one in right there. There we go. Cool. So we have our second weak aura there. And if we close it, there we go. We've got our icon and we've got our bar. The final one that we want to look at is text. So text is pretty straightforward. Let's click text. Let's click default. Let's go Fireblood, cooldown tracking. There it is. Okay, so we can drag it over here. Let's go ahead and make sure our Fireblood bar is displaying. And yeah, looks good to me. Okay, so nothing's showing up for the text because the text doesn't have a bar or an icon or anything. Now, what all these are going to do is show the progress on the cooldown for Fireblood. So let's use Fireblood and actually see that in action. Now, pay attention to how these are different. If we click on Fireblood, boom, they all empty out. And we have right here the icon with the countdown that's filling back up, and it'll eventually return to its full state, and you'll be able to see it. This works just like putting an ability on your action bar, essentially. For the bar, we actually now have a bar that's going to fill up over time, and once it's full, we'll be able to cast Fireblood again. And then we have just the simple text cooldown countdown with no image or anything. So these are the 3 types of auras that you're going to want to use most of the time. Honestly, the rest of them you can basically ignore. Okay, you don't really need to mess with models, progress textures, stop motions, or textures, right? Get into that stuff later. These are going to be the most useful to you. Now, you may be asking, but what about dynamic group and group? Well, these are interesting because they're not really individual auras themselves. There's ways for you to organize and move auras. So first off, we have groups, okay? Groups are pretty straightforward. Let's make a Fireblood group. So if we make our Fireblood group, we can now take the different Fireblood auras that we created and we can drag them down and put them inside this group. Okay, so then we have Fireblood text, and now we can click on our little plus icon, and that's going to show us, hey, all 3 of these are in the same group. Now, the cool thing about groups is you can change settings for the whole group all at once if you want to, and you can also move all the icons at one time. So if we click on Fireblood group, you're going to see this big box pop up here. Okay, and we can actually move this all around. So let's say we wanted our cooldowns to actually be under here. And we could do that. And then if we close off, those are over there the exact same way we had them laid out. We can use Fireblood again, and then you see they all pop up. So that's the nice thing about groups. You can move everything together. And if we go in and say we wanted to make it so that we actually put our icon kind of next to our bar instead, and then we took our text and we put our text over here at the end for whatever reason, now as a group, we can move all that stuff together and it stays in that same layout that we put it in. This is really useful, for example, if you create something like a player bar and you decide you don't like it being in the center of your screen, you want to put it off to the left. Well, if it's in a group, you can do that without having to move each individual thing all by itself. Okay, so that's what groups do. Now, dynamic groups are a little bit different. Let's make a dynamic Fireblood group. Dynamic groups work in a similar way to regular groups, but the difference is instead of you controlling where everything is laid out within your individual group, like we did over here, dynamic groups control the positioning of the auras within them automatically. So let's take a look at how this works. And for this, we're not going to create a group. We're just going to look at one I already have made. So I have this Warlock Buff Timers dynamic group, okay? And inside of this, there are 6 different auras. Now, these are all set up in a row, and you can see they're all laid out here. If, for example, I had Fireblood on cooldown, and I had the buff, it would show up here on the bottom in a normal group. And if I had Unending Resolve, it would show up above it. And if I had Demonic Core, it would show up right here. And there would be a huge gap in between Demonic Core and Unending Resolve, right? Correct. However, with a dynamic group, we instead can set this so that whichever one of these we have always appears at the very top. And if we get another one, it just pushes it down and pushes it down. Now, keep an eye on this. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take our Fireblood group. We're going to show our buff timers. And we're going to put our Fireblood group right down here at the bottom. Okay, so we know, let's do this, that if we were using a regular group and we used Fireblood, it should show up right here. But because we're using a dynamic group, it's going to show up here, which is right next to our health bar. Okay, so let's watch the difference. If we click Fireblood, you can see it's right here instead of here. If we click another one of our abilities, like Unending Resolve, it just knocks that one down to the next spot instead of them appearing everywhere. So dynamic groups control the positioning of the auras in them automatically. So you don't have to. You can basically set up the first one, and then you could say, okay, if there's a second one, put it below. If there's a second one, put it above. Put it to the left. Put it to the right. You know, whatever direction you choose. So, quick recap on auras. Simple lets you create something from a template, which is a really easy, good way to get started learning weak auras and setting up custom things that you want. Advanced lets you create an aura from scratch. Within these, you can basically ignore model, progress texture, stop motion, and texture. You're mainly going to be creating auras with icons, progress bars, and text. You're going to be grouping auras and controlling their layout with group and dynamic group. Okay? So let's go ahead and get into these. If we're on the left-hand side and you right-click on a group, you're going to have the option to rename it, copy settings for the group as a whole, duplicate the group, export it to a string, which is how most people export weak auras to share, export to a Lua table, which is a more complicated way to share your weak auras, delete children and group, or close. So if you are on a group and you delete the group, it deletes everything in the group. So make sure that you're being very careful when you delete stuff. If, for example, we had our Fireblood group and we just didn't want the text anymore, we would want to right-click on the text specifically and delete it. Now, we do have a slightly different option if you're clicking on an individual aura, which is if you right-click and go to copy settings, you can then copy specific settings instead of one big, broad, generic setting. Okay, so we can delete that, and let's go ahead and delete our group. Okay, so now we're back to just the weak auras that I've already created for my character. The next thing to talk about is this section over here on the right. And we're only going to cover the very basics of what each tab does and some of the bigger options within it, okay? So, first off, the things that you can basically ignore for now. You can ignore the conditions tab, the animations tab, the custom options tab, and the information tab. Okay, these can all be ignored. You don't really need to pay attention to them. Okay, so that leaves us with display, trigger, actions, and load. So let's start with display. If you want to change the appearance of your aura, you do it in the display tab. You can change the texture of the aura. You can change the color. You can change the size, the positioning, the alignment, the font, drop shadows, anything having to do with the way your weak aura looks, you change in the display tab. So if for some reason you import one and it's this ugly bright green color and you want to change it to a nice forest green, you would click on that aura, you would go to display, and you would find the right section that has the color in it, and you would change that color. Within the display tab, like I said, this is where you can change textures, the color of your bars, modify your icons. You can also mess with your text. You can add borders, glows, all kinds of stuff in here. The trigger tab is where you set the triggers for a weak aura showing up. So, for example, I only want this Fireblood buff to show up if my player has the buff. So if I don't have the buff, it doesn't show up. In the triggers tab, that's where I set it so that if I have Fireblood, then it will show up. So if we take a look at this, you could see in here it says, hey, if the player has this buff Fireblood and you found it, show up. Don't worry too much about the specifics of that. That's just what it does, okay? So this is where you determine what are the conditions that need to be met in order for this weak aura to display in the first place. I know I just used conditions and display, but that's really the way to describe triggers. What triggers this showing up? So another great example is I have it set so that the trigger for this aura is look at my player. If I don't have Soulstone, trigger this aura. So as soon as I cast it, like I said before, it'll look at my player, go, hey, you do have Soulstone, and it will not trigger that aura. The next tab is the Actions tab. Now, you really shouldn't have to mess with this, but this basically allows you to do extra things when your weak auras display or hide or whatever. So we have on initialization, on show, on hide. So let's say that you have a weak aura setup so that when you hit 30% health, you need to cast this big healing spell on yourself. And so you have the icon pop up in front of your character and it goes, hey, cast it. And then that lets you know to cast that ability. You could also set it up so that when that ability shows, you can print a chat message, you could play a sound, you could create other kinds of things. So what we can do here is let's go in and so Fireblood's available again. Let's do this. Let's go into actions. We got our racial ability here, Fireblood. So on show, let's play a sound. We could play the air horn. Hopefully you guys could hear that. So when we hit Fireblood, we get the air horn, and that lets us know, hey, we successfully cast that. So that's where you can set up these actions. I don't use these very much yet, but this tab is useful if you're like, hey, I'm putting the R's on the screen, but sometimes I'm just not getting it. This could let you do that little bit extra. Another good thing to do is let's say that you had, an ability that was going to buff your party, and you had it set up so that when you cast that ability, it showed your buff, right? You could set it up so that it plays a chat message to the party that says, hey guys, I just cast Power Word Fortitude, or, whatever. So that can also help you easily and automatically communicate to your party or your raid or whatever that you're doing particular things, and they'll know. The last tab that you need to worry about is the load tab. So once again, this determines whether or not an aura will load. The main one that you're going to use here is player class equals whatever. If you're only playing on a single character and you want to refine things a little bit more, you could use talent specialization or class and specialization. You can also use talent selected, all that kind of stuff. So these will help you determine when things load. Like if I wanted to, I could go in and put, hey, this racial ability is only going to load when the player race is Dark Iron Dwarf. If I wanted to make an aura for every single race and have them in here individually, I could do that. What I choose to do instead is have just a generic racial ability, and then I go in and just change the trigger to whatever the spell ability is. So that's an overview, okay? A basic overview of weak auras and everything that's kind of going on. Like I said, I know we didn't get in depth. You're probably just as confused, just as lost, but here's what I would encourage you to do right now. If you want to mess around, go to New Aura and make some stuff from a template, okay? Whatever it may be. Start with something really simple. Pick a ability that you use all the time. Do something like Fireblood and say, hey, I want to make a progress bar. Okay, get in, make your horizontal bar, do Fireblood, cooldown tracking, right? And then once you're in here, mess with these tabs, okay? And I kind of want to show you this as much as I can here. So let's go ahead and move this out of the group. Okay, so we have Fireblood all by itself here, right? Here's an example of something you could do, right? You could make this very simple progress bar for an ability you use all the time. Go in, change the texture. Okay, let's do minimalist, right? Look at the orientation. Right now, this is set right to left inverse. We could do left to right inverse. That looks a little bit better. We can change the bar color. It's Fireblood. Let's make it fiery. Some kind of fiery, maybe like a red orange. There we go. Go in and hit show icon. So now we have the icon there. And maybe we're going to put the icon over on the left like I have over here. Okay, we could desaturate it so it makes it black and white if we wanted to. We could add a spark, right? So now we have a little spark on there. We can change the color of the spark, right? Let's make it red. Okay. Looks good to me. Let's change the background color. So we'll do our bar color. Paste that in, and then we'll just make this a darker version. Okay, sounds good. Scroll down, you could change the height and the width. So, let's make it... this is for the spark. So we'll scroll down to position. So we could change our position if we want to. We could change the anchor, whatever we want here. But let's say we want to make it... a little shorter, right? We'll make it 100. And then we'll make it 15. So we'll make it just a lot smaller. Okay, so now we have a tiny little buff, right? We could go in and we could change the text. If you hover over the text, you get some different options here. So progress, name, all that kind of good stuff. Let's say we don't care about the cooldown text. Let's delete that out. Let's add a border to the whole thing. Okay, we'll make the border color black. Okay, we'll anchor the border to the background. We'll offset it. Let's offset it by 2. Let's make it super thin. Cool. So now we just have this random bar that I messed with. Is it beautiful? Is it fantastic? No, but did I mess with a bunch of options? Yes. So if I click it, look at it. There we go. We've got something going on there, right? That's what I would encourage you to do. Go ahead and make some new auras and just fiddle around with them. Delete them when you're done. The other thing you can do is copy someone else's auras and start messing with their settings as well. So, like I've said, that's a basic overview of WeakAuras. Hopefully that will get you kind of started, get you introduced to the program. I know it can be a little bit overwhelming, but rest assured, I'm going to be sharing WeakAuras with you. And when I do, I'll release videos to help you customize those auras specifically, as opposed to trying to dive super in depth into every single thing that you could possibly do with WeakAuras, because honestly, the possibilities are kind of endless. And so what I wanted to do was just give you a nice overview of the layout of the add-on, what everything is, how you can get started messing around, so that when I put out those videos on how to customize things, you're not totally lost. All right, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, like it. Do all the YouTube stuff, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, all that kind of stuff. Check out the links in the description below for the channel Discord, where you can actually hop in sometimes and watch me building some of these auras. Also, the channel Patreon, where you can help support the channel, help me continue to bring you guys guides, resources, add-on imports, all that kind of good stuff. All your support helps me have more time to do those things and get those out to you faster. So, With all that said, I hope you're having fun in Shadowlands in the pre-patch, whatever you happen to be playing. And as always, I'll see you on the next video.